Welcome, everyone. I'm your host, Edgar and yes, I am the reigning champion of Marco Polo, along with John J.J. Flawless, the fastest netter in the West, and the famous Zach, the pool boy Nicholas. Today, we're talking about the 4 phases pool companies go through, and today we're doing a deep dive into phase number 2, the balancing act. I want to welcome everyone to our live podcast, a podcast where it's all pool talk, and we ain't talking about netting and jetting and splashing and dashing. We're talking about becoming a nation of pool pros. And yes, we will talk about the latest products, trends, and trading in the pool industry. But before we get started, I want to thank our visionary partners for this podcast, the SPPA, Blu-ray Excel, Aquastar Pool Products, Natural Chemistry, Raypack, Heritage Pool Supply, Hayward Pool Products, Poolside Tech, and Pool Brain. We want to thank them for their continued support. Mr. Zacharias, you got that plane ticket ready? Well, today, you know what? We're doing this podcast today because we're going to be out at the Western Pool and Spa Show. So this podcast will actually come out the Monday after. So it will have been an amazing event. But Zach, you got your plane ticket? You ready to go? You flying private jet? Are you flying commercial? You driving? What's your story?
Man, I've given up on the idea of driving, which I did give it a serious consideration. I had my route planned out, where I was going to stop, how far I was going to make it. And, you know, if I were 10, 15 years ago, I think that would be okay. But I don't have that much faith in my ability to last that long on the road anymore. I think I'd get 5 hours and have to stay the night somewhere. So I did. I caved and I got some Dramamine. I've never really, I think my parents gave that to me when I was little and we were driving, but I don't really know what it's going to do. I'm just hoping it puts me to sleep because I'm really dreading this.
So you know what that does, right?
Makes you sleepy?
Negative, Ghost Rider.
I don't know. Everything I read said take that because it's going to make you sleep.
It's more of like if you get car sick, if you get seasick, that kind of stuff, you take that. It does make you a little bit tired and just gets you a little bit down, takes that anxiety away. But here's the problem is they tell you don't take that because what happens if you have to have an emergency landing?
Odds are, if we're having an emergency landing, the Dramamine's not going to be my problem. So.
What happens if you're conked out and they're trying to, everybody get out, and you're just like sleeping over in the corner?
Well, hopefully my seat neighbor will grab me or yank me
and
out.
Carry you?
Just leave me behind. Yeah. I swear every day I wake up and it was like there was an engine fire or something in Houston. I'm like, that's really close to home for me, but I just have to keep reverting to statistics. So,
but here's the problem is we've been joking around about it. And you know how my feed goes, right? My feed goes nuts based on the conversation. I start looking at it and it starts showing me this plane stuff. And it's like 2 years ago, because you go to the comments and if you click on the comment, you can see the date.
Oh yeah.
And I'm like, that's 2 years ago. Like, why is that coming up on my feed? But it's just feeding me all of the plane stuff. So
you should see my feed.
Oh, yeah. I don't want to see your feed.
You wouldn't fly.
You excited to get out to the Western?
I am. I think it's going to be a nice little break. I busted out my clippers and trimmed my mustache for this special event. So that's a big deal. My hair is getting the longest it's probably been in years, and I hadn't shaved in probably 2 months, probably since the Vegas show. It's a special occasion. I figured I would do myself up a little bit.
I just want you to know, look at the camera. Obviously, this is people that are listening can't see it, but if you look at the camera, you and John are all of a sudden starting to get a lot of white on your beards.
Because you keep making me get on airplanes.
Listen, that growth of that gray hair, that's really long. There's no way that grew in the last 2 months.
The last 2 weeks. It just sprouted out. Been a wreck.
Oh, that's awesome. We are definitely looking forward to getting out to the Western Pool and Spa Show. We are going to be doing 4 different educational tracks. They're all going to build on top of each other. I was going through all the PowerPoints last night. I finished those, kind of went through them last night. Finished going through those last night. Really excited about it. We're going to be doing business efficiency, mastering operational efficiencies for success. We're going to be talking about ensuring financial security, protecting your future, your family, your business. We're going to be doing understanding financials, business metrics, and your cost of service, and profit strategies, growth through customer-centric approaches. So every class will build on top of each other. There's going to be some classes that, will only be able to touch the surface of certain things, but then in the other classes, we'll be able to go into detail. So an example, when we talk about the ensuring financial security, protecting your future, your family, and your business, there's a couple different things that we talk about. We talk about the financial side of it, right? So how do you protect yourself from the finance side? What are some of the common pitfalls? How do you set yourself up financially? And then we talk about different protections. We talk about whether it's a sole proprietor, LLC. And in those, we can't go into a lot of detail because we only have 45 minutes. But then when we go into the understanding financials, business metrics, and your cost of service, we're able to break those down, right? So we're able to talk a little bit more about the corporations and what are some of the benefits and all that. We can get into, Zach, the number one thing, and I was just talking about this on our Matrix group, and it's what's the number one reason small businesses go out of business, right? And it's small businesses. I'm not talking big corporations, but the number one reason. And we know that it's financial knowledge, but within that financial knowledge, what is the biggest factor?
Yeah, so you stumped me on that because I saw that come through and I was like, oh, easy, lack of financial understanding. And then you're like, no, within that one. And I was like, I just went quiet and I was waiting for everyone else to answer.
And the interesting thing is within that lack of financial knowledge is that most small businesses don't know the cost of their service or their product, right? And then that leads to bad pricing. You're not pricing your products properly. And then two, it also leads to very slim profit margins. And so that tends to be one of the biggest within that financial knowledge. So we'll go through that in all the trainings that we're doing. We teach you how to be able to figure out your cost of service, do all those things. I'm really excited for the profit strategies because we were talking about it. And I think what we tend to do a lot of times is we always talk about front facing. So what we call front facing, which is the customer, the things that we're telling the customers, the way that we behave. And if it's a customer centric approach, it's all based on making sure that the customer is happy and all the things that you need to do. And we'll talk about those. But then we're also going to talk about the things that you need to do behind the scenes as a business in order to set yourself up for success. So we're going to go into a lot of the details of interviewing the customer. How do you make sure that you're not just chasing revenue to chase revenue and then all of a sudden have it backfire on you, right? So what are the things that you need to do as a business owner to set yourself up and your employees for success in order to be able to achieve that customer centric? Because we talk about it, Zach, and we'll talk about the stats in the class, but it is amazing how much more money a loyal customer will spend with a company if it's customer centric. So we'll get into all those details. We'll do all those classes, but we're definitely super excited to get out there, super excited to get out to the concert and support all the pool pros out there. So we'll see you guys all out at the Western Pool and Spa Show.
Wait, we saw you guys all out at the Western
True,
Pool
we all
Spa
saw you because this will be out on Monday and we're not live. True that. Good catch, Zach. And then after that, we are going to be getting ready for our boot camps. We'll have the first boot camp, which is at Heritage in McKinney, which is going to be the 27th to 28th. The 29th, we go into Gold Medal Pools where we're going to do our second class of the Business Matrix. Really excited about that. And then the week after that, Zach, we turn around. We're March 27th, 28th, 29th. And then the 4th, we're out in Oxnard doing the boot camp over at Rate Pack. So excited about all those things. We are going to be announcing one thing that we're going to be doing at both of those boot camps that we haven't announced. And maybe I'll tease a little something a little bit later. I think what I'm going to do, Zach, is as soon as we finish this podcast, I'm going to do a little post with a little something and just leave it there to see what people say.
That's your thing. Right on the edge of spilling the tea.
Just right, that fine line, right? We're going around that corner, kind of, or we're landing the plane with no wheels.
Oh, perfect.
So looking forward to that and looking forward to hanging out this week. So again, by the time podcast comes out, it'll be past, but looking forward to that. So Zach, let's dive in because I want to talk really quick about these 4 phases. And by the way, I've started to get a lot of feedback from pool pros about these 4 phases. And it's really interesting because I get a lot of conversations, Zach, from the people that are already on the empire stage or they're on the scaling stage. And they're like, man, if we would have done this and this differently in the first 2 phases, oh my God, how much better we would have been. And then I have people in the foundational phase going, hey, I hear you talking about finances and I hear you talking about mastering your service. Can you share and what are the things that we should foresee in the next phases? And I'm like, oh, you got to listen to the podcast because we're going to talk about the next phase on the podcast. So let's talk about, you know what? I think we should do a recap of the first one really quick. Do you want to do that? Do you just want to do a very high level kind of what we talked about really quick before we jump into the second phase?
Yeah, at first I'm going to high level just we got the 4 stages. So the first stage is around the 40 pool mark, and that's going to be the foundational stage. And then your second stage, which we're going to dive into great detail in today, that's when you start getting the 80 to 90 pools. You're starting to get really overwhelmed, maybe consider bringing someone on. That's what we're calling the balancing act. And then you've got your third stage, which is going to be starting to get up 130 plus, the leadership and scaling phase. And that's where you're going to really start looking at your leading and bringing the team together. And then we've got our fourth stage, which is now being dubbed the empire stage, which I love. So that'll be your 200 plus stage. So last week we spent some time diving into the first stage, which is the foundational stage, and just highlighting real high level some of the key focuses when you're in this stage. You've got building strong customer relationships. You've got focusing on quality over quantity. You've got to start looking at establishing efficient processes. You're really starting to look at investing in branding and marketing. Everyone's really worried about how do I get more accounts? How do I bring on more clients? You got to start planning for growth. That's key. It's not something that we have a big vision of we're starting this company. I know for me and Justin, it was we're starting this company so we can buy nice cars and big trucks and all this stuff. Still striving for that one, but
Josh Sandler, his was he wanted a pickup truck with leather seats.
Yeah, that's right.
Remember that? That's pretty cool. Yeah.
So you got to start thinking about actually planning to get that pickup truck with leather seats. Staying financially disciplined, starting to look into that. Leveraging your flexibility. So that's really a point in time where you have the opportunity to be more flexible with the things you do. You're out there providing the service, you're interacting with the customers. It's really your time that's on the line. You don't have a staff or anything that you're operating with. So how do you leverage that flexibility? And then prioritizing work-life balance, which is that is a never ending, always part of the process, is making sure that you're not letting your work life get in the way of your personal life. So that was the first stage, the foundational stage. Today, we're going to go through the next stage, which is the balancing act. And we're going to start talking about the things that are involved in this one.
Yeah. So really excited to do that. Before we do that, I do want to give one humongous shout out to our boy, Joey Busick. He just had a baby. Autumn Hayes Busick was born April 24th, 5 pounds, 6 ounces, 18 and a half inches. Big congratulations to you, my friend.
Awesome.
I know that you are a huge father, and it must be exciting to have a baby girl. And you know what happens with those baby girls, right around the pinky, baby, they got you wrapped up. So Joey, my friend,
13.
What's that?
And then they turn 13.
And then they turn 13, yeah. Joey, big congratulations from the Pool Nation crew. We're excited about it. We know that you're a big, huge family guy. I love to go out to Disneyland, spend time with your kids out there. And you know what? They're lucky as well. So big congratulations to you, my friend. All right, so let's talk about this, Zach. So we're talking about the second phase, which is what we call the balancing act. And I think it's a perfect name for it because you go from that 40 and it comes quick. I don't think a lot of people are prepared when you go from that 40 because you are doing those things. You are delivering that great customer service. You are spending the time, you're answering the phone, you're doing all the things that you do. So it's very easy to get referrals and to be able to grow your business. But it comes a moment where all of a sudden you lift your head and you've got 80, 90 pools. At this stage, you're doing repairs. And so it gets a lot more difficult because you're trying to, fire on all cylinders, get all the pools done, get all the work done, gets a little bit dangerous with regards to the burnout and stuff like that. But at this stage, most pool pros are adding repair, right? And they start to make a little bit of a shift from just the service, and that workload is going to increase. And the pool pro really has to be really smart about dividing that time between servicing and doing the repairs and managing all the other aspects of the business, the billing, the customer service, all these things. And so at this stage, what ends up happening is you start to see a little bit of a decline in the personalized service, right? You can't spend as much time. And it's not at this stage, you could still be really good, but the decline starts to happen at this stage because there's just no way that you can manage it all. It's just not enough time to be able to connect as much with the customers and provide that level of attention and detail to your business. This stage, I think it's really important that efficiency and time management become critical. You really need to start to put some things in place to be able to help you run your business. And this is, like I just said, is where a lot of the burnout starts to happen. So it's really important at this stage for you, if you could go back to the 40 and start looking at what's going to happen in the 90, you would start to put a lot of things in place. And I like what you did because we talked about it and we called them last week the key takeaways. And you were like, man, I think we need to call them the key focus points or the key focus takeaways. So let's go through those and talk about those a little bit. And just like I mentioned, I think the first thing that needs to happen, Zach, is you really need to optimize that time management. And with that heavier workload, man, every minute is going to count. And you have to invest in route optimization. At this point, you can't be going everywhere. And the way that we've built our route, most of us have built our routes, is we take everything that we can. We're going far, we're going here, and at this stage, you really have to start to optimize that route for two reasons. One, for your sanity, but two, before you get into the next phase, which is the scaling phase, you really need to start to be able to fix that route, tighten it, and focus so that you can focus more time on the operations and make the most out of your time.
Yeah. And it's the thing is, and the reason it's the balancing act is it's not like, okay, you've made it to the second stage and now all those things you just had to bust your butt on and work and figure out, okay, now I'm shifting over to these things. It's like, no, you have to maintain all of those things while adding on this next layer of focuses. And that's going to be the case as you progress. The tricky part about this situation is you don't have a team of people to be able to delegate all these other things to. You don't have someone that can take some of these focuses from the foundational stage and that's their job and that's what they work on every day and you don't have to worry about it and it frees you up to work on these things. At this point in your business, you are the one that has to maintain it all. So time management is one of the most important things. And it's easier said than done. And I keep talking about time is money. Everyone knows that. But it's a very limited resource. And you have to be able to make sure that you're maximizing on every bit of time that you have because you have so much more responsibility at this point. I think it's really important to find tools to be able to make the most out of what time you have in a day. What things can you implement to lessen some of the burden that you have in one area or the other. And for me, looking back at this, I think defining a routine would have been one of the most helpful things. And I still struggle with that as my journey goes on. But I think if you can define a routine, and what I mean by that is start planning like a structured schedule, start looking at your business as an actual business or company and put down definitively like your route days or repair days. Maybe I talked to some people, it's like they do route Monday through Thursday and then they have repairs on Friday and Saturday, but define that out and set boundaries and set expectations with customers. What are your days and hours of operations? Because when we're in the foundational stage, it's so easy to say, I get that phone call at noon on a Saturday and
jump all over it.
You jump all over it, or it's Sunday morning and this customer's having an issue. Let me just run over here really quick. At this stage, that becomes very overwhelming because now you've got a lot more accounts. You've got new clients that are seeing your truck or hearing about you from other customers. Those calls keep coming in. And you have to, if you're doing repairs on a Saturday, you have to have some sort of boundary in place that allows you to say, we're closed. I'll get to those calls on Monday because I've allocated this time on Monday mornings to get back to these people. But today I'm focusing on getting these tasks done that I have.
Yeah, 100%. And it's always, man, if I knew then what I know now, but it's almost like you have to start taking these little steps to start to set yourself up for success for the next phase. And that's really important. And that's just a simple little thing that you don't think about, but educating your customers, like you're saying, on we're open from 8 to 5, whatever it is, and educating them, because that's going to play such a vital role when you get to the next scaling stage to be able to have that in place. And what happens a lot of times is we don't shift those things until we're at a point of frustration. And if we look at it from that standpoint, a lot of times you get to that stage and you're angry and you don't care, right? So if a customer's calling, you'll be sure. And then that just starts to get that trickle effect.
Yeah, and I don't think it means at this point you're not working after 5. I think it's the opposite. But I think that it's saying, hey, we're closed, leave a message, we'll get back to you when we open. And then that time you have after that, you're hyper focused on working on your business, going through your finances, whatever it may be, or getting caught up on work in the field, but you're not being overwhelmed with a bunch of phone calls. And the goal ultimately is get to that point where if you do close at 5, then business has been completed from 8 to 5 and you can go home and be with your family and not have to worry about it.
Absolutely. I think the next thing is you really need to balance service quality and efficiency. And I think because what's happening at this stage is you used to be able to spend a lot of time on those pools, and now you have less time on those pools, but you can't cut corners, right? You really have to focus on what are your quality standards going to be. And I'm not saying that you have to do a 50-step cleaning process, right? But if it's going to be 10 or 15, whatever those steps are, you need to start to put that into play now, because as you start to bring somebody on, the last thing that you can do is just train them and throw them out there. There's not going to be quality, right? They're going to be cutting corners. They're not. So at this stage, you really need to focus on maintaining the quality of your work while increasing efficiency. But you need to start to put processes in place so that when you get to the next phase and you bring somebody on, you can say, here's the service quality that we do. Here's the 10, here's the 15 steps that we do. And we do that at every single pool. And we focus on quality, right? That the customer is going to be happy, that the customer is always going to expect, and that we're always going to meet that level of service for those customers. Because what happens, Zach, in this stage is, you're busy, you're doing everything, you don't set a standard, you do it yourself, you know that you're going to do a good job. But when you throw a new person into the equation, there's a whole other world of doors that opens up that you have to go through with regards to training. And then people are going to complain about the employee, right? Because they're not doing as good of a job as you are and all that. So this is the time where you need to start focusing on those.
And I think, like you said, it's the steps. It's crucial that you identify those steps, because a lot of times we have steps that we do when we can spend that time that may be a little extra touch to the customer, but is it really have the ROI that we need on our time? And so it's kind of identifying this into a process, I guess, and creating a consistent process. And you also have to have that process defined in order to really start putting numbers to the cost of delivering the service versus the rate that you need to be charging the customer. If it's not a consistent thing, like, yeah, at the end of the day, every one of the pools is clean, safe, maintained, great. But if you're doing it multiple ways amongst the pools, then it's hard to pin down, like, what should the average time be for my service? What steps are actually involved? And again, I think looking at the steps and saying, identifying, are they unnecessary? Are they inefficient? Is the ROI really there? And then looking at what things you can not cut corners on, but eliminate, that will give you that efficiency back.
And the other thing that's important is this falls into the good, better, best mentality that we always talk about. And, if you're charging for a very VIP service and you're charging a very high rate, then there's certain things that you have to deliver at that high price for them to have a value for the customer. And so this is where you need to define where you're going to be. within that, and then really start to prep it for when you hire that employee and you bring them on. You can train them and say, hey, we're a VIP service. We're not cutting corners. We're not netting and jetting. We are delivering exceptional service. And here's the 15 steps that every single pool is going to take. And it doesn't matter if it's 30 minutes or 45 minutes or an hour, whatever you charge in that VIP, that's what the customer is going to get.
100%. Number 3. So the third one we have under our focus is streamlining processes. And this is one of my favorite things to try to figure out. I think that's the fun part of owning a business and running it. So this is the point where you have to start looking at systems and things that you can implement for invoicing or inventory communication. And like we talked about in the beginning, like we focus a lot on that kind of external communication to our customer. Well, there's also a whole half of internal things within your business to help streamline that communication so that it's consistent, effective, and doing what it needs to be. So this is a point where you start looking at processes to cut out errors and variances and save time. And the challenge here is at this stage is you have to do more work to get these things going and get them implemented. Maybe there is a way around it, but I haven't ever found one, and I haven't ever encountered anyone that's found one. So you're already stretched for time. And that's why it's so important, going back to optimizing time management, that after 5 o'clock when you're closed and your business is done for the day, it's now you're working on these things. You're working on the processes and things to implement. And the way I would tackle this, just my 2 cents on it, is start identifying the areas that are causing you the most frustration or consuming the most time, or where you're having the most issues or complaints maybe, and see, is there a way to put a process in place to resolve that stuff, or some way automate it with a system, or in some cases outsource it. And when we were very small, like I outsourced different things, like some bookkeeping and billing. And at one point before Leslie came on board with us, we had a bookkeeper that they said, for some extra money, we'll answer the phone for you. And so we started having them answer the phone and take messages and things until we could get that going. So it's crucial at this point to start looking at, where can I become more efficient? Is there something I can put in place to save me a bunch of time? Billing, that's, I think, the like number one thing that I hear. That's the nemesis of everyone. And it's like, nowadays there's systems in place that you can, like, the first hits and everything's done, right? And some of my buddies I know, they still fold the old invoice, lick the envelope, put on the stamp, and send it out. And I'm like, I couldn't do it. I wouldn't be in business if I had to do that. So
especially as you start to scale and you get so many accounts, it just becomes very difficult to be able to do
think
that.
of the 1,000 pullers. You're going to lick 1,000 envelopes,
Yeah.
and 1,000 stamps.
But I think this is the first one. And I think you also have to look at things that are going to be important and impact the business the most. And cash flow is obviously something that we talk about, because, man, you can make $100,000 every month, but if you're only flowing 50,000, 20,000 through your business, really revenue at that point doesn't matter, because if you don't have the cash flow to run your business, you're not going to be in good shape. So I think this is one of those where pool pros at this stage really need to focus on, what process are we going to put in place? What are our terms? How are we going to manage our billing, so that as we start to scale, right? Because the next phase is scaling, where you hire an employee, and cash flow is going to be really important, because you have to have cash to be able to pay your employees. And if you don't have that cash flow, employees aren't going to be like, oh yeah, just wait another 2 weeks till you get the checks in order to be able to pay me. No, you need to pay them if they're going to stay on. I think this is one of those where you really need to start doing your homework, setting up how you're going to be doing your billing, whether it's on the 1st, whether it's on the 15th, and doing 15 days. It's $30 late fee or percentage of late fee, whatever it is. You're going to have credit cards on files, whatever those requirements are that you think that you need to have in place. This is going to be a focus area that you need to do at this stage, because when you get 300 pools, if you don't have that figured out, what you're going to have is complete chaos. And we've seen it. We've talked to a lot of pool pros that have been in that situation where it's very difficult. to manage at 300 pools, and having all these employees and the stress of not having that money will just, man, it'll kill you. I think the next one for this one in this phase, focus takeaway, Zach, is really to prepare to bring on employees, right? Prepare for expansion and bringing on employees. And this is another section where we get so busy in the business that you have 80 to 90 pools. And at least I did it that way too, where I was just like, I'm so busy, I just need to hire somebody. And you get to that point of desperation of the burnout and all the phone calls and doing all the service and doing all the repairs, that you bring somebody on. And what happens is we haven't thought it through. We haven't put a system in place. We don't know what our 10 or 15 or 20 points of focus are on the pool. But yet we're bringing somebody on, we're training them for 2 or 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and then we just throw them out there. And we have the expectation that they're going to know we're a VIP service. And these are the 15 things that they need to do at each pool. And here's the responsibilities that they have. And that responsibility might be that you need to wash the truck once a week, and you need to put gas, and you need to fill up your truck with all these supplies that you need. And we just have the expectation that the employees are going to know that, but we haven't done the proper training and onboarding to give them all the tools that they need in order for them to be efficient. And so we don't prepare for it, and we bring on an employee, and now we have a route that's all over the place. We haven't streamlined our invoicing and billing and all that. We're having cash flow issues. And now we throw on a team member onto the training for 3 weeks, and we throw them out. And then 4 months later, they quit.
Or bring on the complaints.
And the complaints will start because you haven't done the proper preparations to bring on that employee. And then a lot of pool pros out there say, man, people just don't want to work and blah, blah, blah. And it's no, you didn't have a great plan in place to be able to bring somebody on and give them all the tools and all the support that they need in order for them to be successful and in order for them to want to stay with you. And so they go into that cycle. And Zach, there's nothing worse than having 150 pools and having somebody quit on you. So now how do you do everything? What are you going to do as a business? So it's very terrifying. So at this stage, it's really important that you start to prepare for bringing on an employee and streamline a lot of those processes to eliminate a lot of headache.
That's a very scary thing if you haven't. I mean, for me, I'd never been in a position of managing or recruiting, or I really barely had a lot of job experience before starting the Pool Boys with Justin. And looking back on this, I think for me, I'm a pen and paper person. When I'm planning, I like to sit down, have my thoughts. And I think you got to start thinking about some of the more basic things and writing them out, writing out that plan as far as what's the attendance plan. When you bring someone on, what's your expectation of them to, like, when are they working? When are they showing up? What time should they be there? What happens if they're not there on time? How are you going to handle that? Again, going back to what are the steps of service that they need to be trained on? That's where it's important to define those steps out so that now you know exactly what they need to be trained to. Just in general, what are the expectations? List that stuff out. And the big one is research. And I'm still researching and figuring out stuff, but start kind of understanding job ad, like recruiting. How are you going to put a job ad together? Where are you going to get your candidates from? There's a lot that goes into just a job ad. Why should they work for you? What's the job entailed? And then this one, I think interviewing. Even if you don't have the best job ad, I think the interviewing piece has to have a lot of focus. And I've talked to a lot of people, some of my buddies, and it's like they're having problems with turnover. And it's like, well, I'll ask, what's your interview process? And they don't have a single one. It's just kind of a quick conversation. They said they're willing to work.
They're convincing the employee why should they work for them.
Yeah, 100%. And looking back, when we started, I had this presentation on like why the Pool Boys was awesome and what we're doing. And here's a little of our history. It was a literal slideshow, and I had printed it out. So I had this stapled flip packet. And my interview was me sitting there talking 80% of the time and selling them. And then at the end, I'm like, sound good? Sound like something you want to do? They're like, yeah, of course. They're like, heck yeah. And that was a hard lesson learned. And you've got to be able to vet these people and make sure they're a good fit. And then retention. What's your plan for retention? Money is a good motivator, but I don't think it's the best motivator. So, what other things are you going to have? How are you going to promote their growth and training? And how are you going to engage with them on a regular basis? How are you going to hold them accountable? It's a lot. And I don't expect anyone to have it like pre-planned and figured out before their first hire, because you're already living in the chaos and this is like a full-time thing. But I think if you sit down and put just a little bit of time and thought into it and maybe have some sort of a rough plan, you'll be steps ahead than most people that get to this point. And I think it'll save a lot of stress and headaches.
Absolutely. Zach, let's do this. Let's take a quick word from our sponsors. When we come back, we will continue. Welcome back, everybody, to the Pool Nation Live podcast. We continue our conversation on phase 2, the balancing act. I really like that name out of all the phases because it truly is a balancing act, Zach, at that stage.
100%. Side note, I can't get over your progression as your radio voice. And I saw this video. I don't know if it's real or not, but it was this guy and he was homeless and he was like joking around doing like radio voices and stuff. And then supposedly he went to work for like NBC or one of those things. And I'm like, oh man, Edgar is like right. Those two, you're on par with that guy.
Oh, that's a little scary, Zach. So moving on to the next one, we talked about optimizing time management, balancing the service quality and efficiency, streamlining processes. We obviously talked about prepare for employee expansion, and that's a big one. I think the other one that is a key focus at this stage is, and you're probably already doing it, but really diversifying your services. And at this stage, you're already doing service. You're most likely doing a lot of repairs that really can boost your revenue, but you have to make sure that your prices are set properly, that you're able to allocate time as well. And one of the challenges that we see within the pool industry is that a lot of times people don't get the pricing right. And a lot of it is, like we talked about at the beginning of the podcast, we don't know the cost of our service or the cost of our product. So we're pricing things out there. So it's really important for you to have a really clear idea of what those costs are, so that you can be profitable. Because if you're charging too low of a rate and your profit margins are tight and you want to bring somebody on, Zach, it could be devastating. And the challenge is we get so busy, Zach, doing 80 to 90 pools. We get stressed out. We get to the point of burnout that the mind just says, just bring somebody on. If you bring somebody on, it's going to solve all the problems of the world that you have. And it's not. And if you don't know exactly what the cost of service is and you're bringing somebody on, it could make things even worse. Like it can tighten that cash flow. You're not making as much money as you thought. Then you're going, what am I doing wrong? I'm servicing all these pools and yet I'm not making the money that I think I should be making.
It's like multiplier, it compounds.
Oh, yeah. And so really you want to focus on diversifying your services and the things that you could do, but you want to make sure that you are charging the right amount of money. And that goes for repairs. It doesn't matter if you do deco seal. It doesn't matter if you get into renovation, if you get into any of those types of things, any added services that you do, you have to make sure that they're priced well. And the biggest thing that I will tell you to do is always from day one, charge enough if you were paying an employee. And if you could do that, as you get to this stage where you're headed to in the next stage, it's going to have a huge impact on you being able to do that.
Yeah. And I think one of the traps, and we've talked about it before, is if you find yourself in that like, need more money, need more money, need more money, because you're not charging an adequate amount of money for the service you're delivering, it's really easy to fall into the whole, what I've called the yes man thing. And so it's easy to open up and be like, we need to diversify our services. But then all of a sudden you find yourself looking at adding this and adding that. And yes, I can take care of this. And yes, I can mow your lawn while I'm back there. And yes, I will take the trash out for you. And a lot of that may not have the ROI on the time and energy and money that goes into it. And I think a lot of people also fall into the thing of just looking at what the competitors are doing. And that's a tough thing because you don't know their situation. You don't know, maybe that's something that's bleeding out the other areas of their business. Maybe your maintenance is priced right, but then you add on this service and you're trying to be competitive with them on that, and it ends up bleeding out your maintenance stuff. So when you're diversifying, like Edgar was saying, you have got to make sure that there's a good enough return on it, and also that there's demand for it. And I've been guilty of, we're going to start sealing decks with stone sealer. That's a great money maker and it's a great service, but like, oh, all my customers are asking for it, when reality it's probably two people mentioned it, and now me and Justin are going out and exploring this and buying equipment and things like that. And at the end of the day, it wasn't a real good thing for us. So when you're looking at diversifying your service, understand the costs, the resources needed, make sure there's an actual return, make sure there's an actual demand for it, and then make a process for it, because everything is going to tie back to having a process.
Yeah. And we talk about this all the time. And I've shared this example before too. I've seen pool pros that go out there and they're doing 80, 90 pools. And then they see somebody doing bead blasting and they're like, oh, we want to do bead blasting. And they go out and they spend $10,000 on these rigs. Now the challenge is, you're doing 80 or 90 pools. When are you going to be able to go do that bead blasting? That means that you're going to have to drop some pools in order to be able to do it, or do it on Saturday and Sunday. And if you're at 80, 90 pools and now you're doing bead blasting on the weekend, the burnout is coming for you, right? It's like that meme where you see the one person running and the other person chasing them behind, and you're running and the burnout is chasing you, right? The burnout, it's trying to catch up with you. So,
and then when are you working on your employee, and when are you working on your business to get to the next stage? And you end up diversifying into all these things and you don't have any time for any of that. You have to be aware of that.
yeah. So really important to diversify, but I think it goes into the focus of, like you were saying, make sure that you're ready for it. Make sure that you've given it some thought. You've broken it down. You've written it down. You've thought about the pros and the cons to each one of them. And there's some things that just aren't worth doing. It's better to outsource certain things. Like Zach, I know that you outsource lights. You don't like to do lights. It takes two people. It's not worth it for your business. And so when you do it, you put pen to paper and you're like, this just doesn't make sense. It's easier to outsource it. It solves a lot of problems. The next one is one of my favorites that I like to talk about all the time. And that is, at this stage, you really have to start to have a lot of things in place to monitor your finances closely. And it's very difficult because at this stage, you're most likely you're working in your business and not working as much on your business because you're in that balancing act. But you have to watch every expense at every corner. You can't just drive blindly out into the sunset thinking that everything's going to be okay. You need to stay on top of your pricing. You need to stay on top of your expenses. You need to continue to look at things on a regular basis, right? Whether it's insurance, whatever it is, you have got to start to put things in place, because as you get bigger and as you get, Zach, to the Empire State, man, monitoring your finances is a whole different level than what it is at 90 pools.
Yeah. And this goes back to one of the reasons small businesses fail, right? Lack of financial understanding. And you should already be working on this from the beginning, but now it's just become that much more important. And like Edgar has talked about, like cash flow and hiring someone, how are you going to pay them? Because that paycheck has to hit every payday. And at this point, this is where it becomes really important to start, if you're not already accurately tracking your expenses, really start separating out any personal. I talked about this last week, but now it is vital. If you're going to make it to the next stage, you need to run your business as its own entity and your personal life as a separate entity. And you need to start categorizing things. This is where you need to start looking at, how much am I spending on maintenance equipment? How much am I spending on chemicals? How much am I spending on phone service? And really understanding these things. You have to start digging into this, spending time looking at the numbers, making sure that you're profitable, because again, cash flow hides problems. I have seen it. I have experienced it where it's like, there's money in the account. We've made it to another month, but why aren't we winning? Why aren't we winning? And it's like, if you push pause at this moment in time and let all the dust settle and everything get paid and all that, you might be negative. And so You need to make sure that you're learning these things and really starting to focus on them. And you got to have time for that. All right. So the next one we have is focusing on customer retention.
Another one of my favorites.
Yeah. And this is actually for this year, it's one of our focuses. And so as you go through some of these things, you get them figured out and then you get bigger and you lose sight of them and then you've got to revisit it. And so we're currently working on customer retention and just going back. Now you're busy, your time's consumed. You don't have all the time to spend one-on-one with the customer or give them all the attention. And it becomes important to figure out, how am I going to still give them a good customer experience so that they want to stay with us, but also be able to go out and do all the things I need to do. And I think it's really important at this point is start looking at systems. There's a lot of different job management software out there that really streamline communications and, hey, we were here today and here's what happened, and give them a systematic way to be able to reach you. Call the office. Another one on this would be setting good expectations, boundaries. A lot of times those customers that were in the beginning, those expectations have been set. And John talks about it's hard to break old habits. And I've experienced that to where I have, to this day, I still have some of those OG customers that no matter what, they're going to call me and I have to, hey, call the office. So moving forward, what expectations are you setting with the new customers coming on? And I've talked about it before. I had changed my voicemail to say, do not leave me a message, because the likelihood that I was going to get back to them at all was really slim. And so I had to put something in there to say, please call the office, do not leave me a message. And then at that point, if they disregarded that message, I was able to apologize for not getting back to them and say, my voicemail says this for this reason or whatever. But the cheapest customer is the one you already have. And so what things can you do? And you've got to be aware of things you can do to keep them that aren't going to add more of a burden on time and money. It's real easy. One of them I've heard is like leaf blowing off the patio while you're out there and things like that. And that's that extra layer of service, which is fine if it is in your steps of service and factored into the cost of the service that you're providing. But start looking at what things can you streamline for their experience to give them a better experience. So ultimately they want to stay on service with you.
And this is one of my favorite ones because customer retention is huge. And we see a lot of companies that get to a certain level and then they go, man, we're picking up 20 pools and we lose 20 pools. We pick up 30 pools and we lose 30 pools. And we can't seem to get out of that hole. And we need to be able to grow. And so a lot of it comes to the customer retention side. And it's really important to focus on the key things that are going to keep that customer with you. And a lot of it is going to be simple things like obviously like communication and the level of service that you're doing. And your communication can't be the same as it was when you had 40 pools because you had all the time in the world. But now you need to put other things in place in order to be able to communicate with the customer properly. And if you're growing and you're moving on to those next stages of the scaling and the empire, at that stage, you really need to have somebody in the office taking the phone calls, right? There's a point of communication. The customer is going to always feel like there's somebody there to talk to me, not when you're in the balancing act. And it's like, oh, Edgar called me because his pump's not working. I'm too busy. I'm not going to call him. And then you get busy with 3 other jobs and you end up calling Edgar back on Tuesday. And now Edgar's upset. And Edgar's like, I had a party over the weekend. He didn't even respond, but you are just so busy with work that you're balancing all these things that those things start to fall through the wayside. And it's incredible how much retaining your customers and focusing on retaining them, that the impact that it has. So here's a couple stats that I love. 96% of unhappy customers won't complain to you directly. I want you to think about that for a second. 96% of unhappy customers will not complain to you directly. 91% of unhappy customers will leave without a warning. And it could be anything. Oh, my husband's going to take care of it. Or people aren't going to confront you and say, hey, Zach, you know what? Your service just sucks. It's not what it used to be. I'm leaving. People don't like to have that type of conversation and confrontation. They'll just leave without a warning. And the biggest thing is they're going to share their experiences with other people. And you think, oh, it's not that big a deal. It's just one customer. But when that happens to you 5 or 10 times over the course of the year, it starts to have an impact. Okay. The other thing that's really interesting, you focus on those customers, you focus on that customer retention. 86% of customers are willing to pay more for great service. 86% of customers are willing to pay for great service.
I've been told or read or heard it's like price. If the value's there, price is not the
Price is
issue.
not an issue because yes, there are people that are budget conscious, right? There are people that are going to drive the Hyundai or the Kia or whatever, but there's also a lot of people that drive the Mercedes, the BMW, the Range Rovers, right? So it's there. So if you provide that great service, the customers will be there. Was it going to be every single customer? Absolutely not. That'll never happen. But the other thing that was really interesting to me, and this is the check out this stat, 60% of customer-centric companies are more profitable than those that are not. So those companies that focus on customer service and delivering that great service are 60% more profitable than the ones that are not. And that's related to you're charging more for delivering a greater service. So Zach, I'm charging more for what you do. Of course, I'm going to be 60% more profitable because I'm delivering that very high level service, but my profit margins are going to be a lot bigger.
The thing is, high level service, again, doesn't mean necessarily doing more. It's just doing it better.
Correct. It's the better communication. It's the being proactive instead of reactive. It's having your employees in uniforms. It's running it like this true professional company, having somebody answer the phone all the time that they feel that, hey, if I need to call my pool company, they're going to answer. The next one is really addressing the burnout risk. And we talked about this a little bit, but this is the stage that it is really important to focus on that burnout. Zach, I don't know if you noticed, but huge, big shout out to our Pool Matrix chat. The Pool Matrix chat.
I love
Man,
it.
over the last couple of days, this stuff has just been on absolute fire. I don't remember what I was doing yesterday. And I was working on PowerPoints, I think, and then I was on a couple calls, and then I came back and I clicked on it, and it was crazy. There was like 125 messages, and it was everything from service agreements to billing at the beginning of the month, and stain, and pool build, and startups, and just all this kind of stuff. So I want to give everybody that is part of the Matrix a huge shout out to everybody for being on the Matrix, for helping everybody. Somebody just posted some pictures with what seems to be debris that was on the pool from vegetation that got there and kind of stained the bottom of the pool. It looks a little bit like rust too. John had a good point. Just the way that one is spread out, that it looks like a comet. It could be just organic. But anyways, big shout out to everybody that's on the chat because I'm loving it. Everybody's helping each other out and doing all that stuff. John just replied, when you get that fanned out look stain, it looks like the rust bleeding through. So that could be too. But really addressing the burnout risk, because Zach, at this stage, this is where it's really dangerous because you're doing everything yourself. You're doing the 80-90, you're doing the repairs, you're doing the billing, you're dealing with the customers, you're dealing with the complaints, you're dealing with happy customers, you're answering the phone all the time, you're working on Saturdays and Sundays a lot of times to be able to catch up with your work and all that. And really for all the pool pros that are in this stage, be aware of the burnout. And there's nothing wrong with admitting that the burnout is there. So really implement certain things for avoiding overloading yourself and understanding that you have to be able to maintain that long-term performance. You have to maintain, this is a marathon, it's not a sprint, and you have to maintain your health.
Yeah. And I mean, routine is key. And that's why it's so important. It's funny, each one of these elements, there's some core things that really contribute to it. And I'm going to go back to having those boundaries. We've talked to people several times that it's like, they're like, I feel like I have no time for my family. I feel like I have no time for my friends, myself, my kids. And I'm working 7 days a week from the moment I wake up until 9 o'clock at night. I'm on the computer doing this, and that burnout will hit you. And I think it's something we all go through. And then you just got to find a way to get reignited. But if you can prepare for that and understand that it is a part of it, and you can put these things in place now, then you're going to have greater advantage. And for me, it's the gym. When I'm consistently on a routine of going to the gym, my mind is right. And even if it's just going in there, it's like I've checked something off on my box that, okay, I'm maintaining some sort of structure and I got that out of the way. But it may be different for everyone else. But you have to focus on it. And I talk to people that like missing kids' things is just non-negotiable. And I look back and I'm like, man, I feel that way now and I make it like a high priority. But back in when I was in stage 1 and stage 2, I wish I would have not sacrificed some of the things I did. But now
It's
I
part
don't.
of the
But
game.
it's part of the game. It is. It's absolutely part of the game.
It's
And you
part
got
of that growth, right? Your business is your baby too. So you have to spend a lot of time on it and coddle it and take care of it and deal with it. The next one is redefine your marketing strategy. And here I don't mean have this grandiose plan of a 50-page marketing plan of what you're going to do. Up to this stage, a lot of your business that comes in is through a lot of referrals. And you know this better than anybody else, Zach, is as you start to scale, as you start to go into the next phases, referrals will only get you so far. And if you want to grow and you want to double the size of your business, there's a lot of other things that you need to do in order to be able to do that. But at this point, when we talk about redefining your marketing strategy, is start to look at your branding, start to look at what things you're being recognized for, right? Start to build your business identity of what your pool company is going to be known for. What is it that customers are going to say about your business? Start to have that plan in place. And then the other thing that you should do is even within your marketing strategy, Zach, take a look at, are you going after high-end customers? When I bought my pools, a lot of them were not in the greatest areas. So the income was tight. So I started to move into neighborhoods where there were more affluent neighborhoods. There was a lot more money. And I changed my marketing strategy a little bit and was like, hey, I'm going to focus more on this type of a client because I have less issues with regards to whether it's repairs or any of these types of things. And hey, I make more money for servicing the pools. I'm more profitable in that section right there. So work on that, figure out that profitability, start to create your identity, because in the next stage, you're going to bring on an employee and you now need to make sure that your company has a presence and they know what your core strategy is.
Yeah, and I think one of the most important things you said is identifying what you're hearing or what customers are writing about you in reviews. And that was a really powerful exercise for me because as we were establishing our brand identity, it was like, okay, I just started reading through all the reviews I could find on Facebook or Google or Yelp or whatever. And I started to highlight key repetitive terms: punctual, consistent, professional. And it really gave me a solid understanding of what it is people like about the pool boys. So then as we turn and we're looking at our marketing strategy, it's okay, these are the clientele we have and we want, and here's the things they're saying about us. So what did our marketing become? We're consistent, we communicate, we're professional, we're punctual. And we were able to just push those things out in an advertising or marketing way that we were able to, those are the trigger words for the people that we want to serve. And so obviously the new customers coming in, they're more of our clientele because they're looking for people with those attributes. And then the other thing on marketing, you get bombarded with sales calls from whatever it may be, this organization or that organization. They have the $300 a month marketing plan or this or that. You have to start looking at where you're getting the most leads from. And I think that's as simple as asking the question of, how'd you hear about us? And once you start
You
doing
have
that,
got to do that.
you got to ask that. And then if you, for example, if you're spending a bunch, I know Yelp is very strong in some markets. For us, it was never very strong, but we started hearing Facebook's 9 out of 10 times it was Facebook. So when Yelp called and they have this marketing program and it's X amount of money, it was easy for us to say, no, no, thank you. We're putting the spend into Facebook or shifting it into trying something else. I think it's super important because a lot of times in the beginning, we're like, we need more accounts, especially when you bring that first person on. if you don't have enough for them, I hear this a lot. I don't have quite enough pools to bring this next person on, but I'm overwhelmed with the amount of pools we have. So a lot of people just start throwing things at the wall trying to get those accounts, and you can blow through money quickly that way. Quick hit on that is, like Edgar said, look at what's being said about you that people like or don't like, use that to your advantage, and then start asking how you heard about us.
You want to hit up the last one, Zach?
Yeah.
Because this one's important for moving into the next phase.
Yeah. The last one today is to start thinking about long-term goals. And this is the never ending thing and so important to me. This is how you get to the next phase. And you've got to have a long-term vision, but then in between here in that vision, you have to have goals and your stepping stones or your milestones that keep you on track with moving towards that vision. So start planning out, sit down. This is a repetitive exercise, and it is okay. It will change as you go through things, you experience things, but you have to keep actively working on this. And if you have these goals in place, as you're knocking them out, you're moving forward towards your ultimate objective. And this whole thing is, in my mind, it's building and growing your business with purpose. Personally, in the beginning, we had no goals. Like I said, big trucks, nice cars. And so how do you get big trucks and nice cars? You get money. And how do you do that? It's take on as much work as you can and do as much as you could. And that was a failed approach. That was not successful at all. And I would say, I've talked about it before, it was 7, 8 years in of us spinning our wheels, taking that approach before someone sat me down and said, hey, man,
listen, pal,
you should have a plan. What's your plan? And I'm like, big trucks, nice cars. And they're like, no, there's a lot more to
pickup
this.
truck with leather seats.
Yeah. It's so getting someone and having the opportunity to really look at the big picture, and someone that made me sit down and write this out and put thought into it, start painting that picture, and then saying, okay, now what are the steps to getting here? Okay, put in these steps. Now, how are you going to get to this first goal, and putting in those steps? It's, again, vital. It's vital. If you're going to go, you can't just aimlessly, we've talked about it time and time again and used all the different analogies, but if you're just flowing without any real purpose or plan, you're going to veer off course.
Absolutely. Zach, let's do this. Let's take our final word from our sponsors. When we come back, I want to get your final thoughts. Welcome back, everybody, to the Pool Nation Live podcast. We continue our conversation with Mr. Zacharias. We continue to talk about the different phases of the Pool Pros. And I love this series, Zach, for a couple of different reasons. Is once we started to sit down and put it together, it was like the light bulbs and the light switches started going on. It was like, oh, man, absolutely. And if I would have done this, and if I would have done that, and oh, I did this at that stage, that was awesome. Yeah, I was able to do that. Takes you down memory lane a little bit, but it also lets you look at your experience that you've figured out. And just to tell everybody, there is no A to Z plan. There's no follow these 3 steps and you're going to be successful. A lot of it for a lot of different businesses is you have to try different things, and what works for Zach might not work for me. And what works for me probably doesn't work for Zach. And maybe Zach has one way of doing things and that works just fine, but that's not the way I like to do it in my business. I want to do it like this. And that's the beauty of owning your own business, that you could do and run your business however you think it needs to run, as long as it's successful. So there is no A to Z plan. A lot of it is you're going to have to go through those struggles. A lot of it is you're going to have to go through the frustration. A lot of times you're going to go down these rabbit holes, whether it's learning hiring, which that can be its own business within itself, for God's sakes, right? Yeah, learning finances is, for some reason, we're so afraid of it, but it's, once you break it down, it's simple. It's math. It's this minus this equals this. And the equals is I either made money or I didn't make money. That's how complicated it is. It's simple. But for some reason, we shy away from it. But the only way that you're going to get from stage 1 or phase 1 to phase 4 is to go through the struggle, to do things, get out there, research, network, meet with other people. You really could be having a situation and be able to have a network where you can call Zach and say, hey, Zach, how do you handle this? And Zach's going to be like, oh, this is how I do it. And you're going to be like, oh, you just saved me 6 months of a headache trying to figure all this out. So it's the beauty of it.
Yeah, it's interesting because there's a lot that goes into it. And with looking at all the key takeaways, right? Just a list. I can think about a business model for each. There is a business out there that delivers specific services related to that singular item. And there's probably 200 books that are written on that singular item. And each one of these things, like you talked about, there is really an industry behind each one of these items. Like, oh, get your time back. There's 10 ways to master your time management. Need help? Sign up for our service or whatever. And so it is not as easy as just, my point being, it's not as easy as just saying, yeah, master your time management. There's a lot that goes into it. Or, put a plan down for hiring. There's a lot going into it. But I think the true idea of this is that if you can go into the first stage and understand, here's some of the key focuses I should have, and don't let me get distracted in stage one with acquiring a business. Maybe that's not the right stage for that opportunity. Instead, here is a list of some of the things that if I focus on these and I really hone in on these and put some sort of system or structure in place with these items, that'll set me up for stage two. And when I get to stage two, here's some of these things. But it's amazing. There's a lot that goes into it. But I think knowing these things will help tremendously. And like you said, looking back on it, it's like, man, I failed in a lot of these areas and learned the hard way. And it honestly wasn't until I started having guidance with some of these things that I think we truly started to succeed. So should we recap them?
I forgot to ask, was that your final thoughts? Because I just
pulled a John there, didn't I?
Pulled a John there. Yeah, let's definitely. Will you recap them really quick?
Yeah. So for stage two, the balancing act, the things that you're going to want to start working on and adding is mastering your time management, maintaining that quality of service as you grow, creating scalable systems. Consider hiring help, which I know when you get to this point, it's going to be on everyone's mind. Focusing on customer retention. So what things can you do to keep the customers that you already have? Diversifying revenue streams and being conscientious of what actually adds an ROI and what actually just wastes your time and money. Streamlining repairs and maintenance, monitoring those finances, digging in, understanding them, really getting a good understanding of what it's costing you to deliver your service, what it's costing you to operate your business as a whole. Avoiding burnout, making sure that you're putting in time for yourself, and then planning.
Long-term planning, right?
Long-term planning.
You got to have a roadmap. You don't have a roadmap, you don't know where you're going to get. You don't know where you're going to arrive. And the one thing that I want to talk about just really quick with a lot of the pool pros and a lot of business owners out there is your business is a journey. It's not a destination. For an employee, they have a destination. They show up in the morning. At the end of the day, a certain amount of work has to be done. They reach their destination and they just repeat that every day. For a business owner, that doesn't happen. You don't go, oh, I'm going to reach to 250 pools and just have everybody run the business and me do nothing. It doesn't work like that because it's your baby. And what happens is, yeah, you might have other people running your business and you in the background, but if somebody quits, you're all of a sudden pulled right back into the equation, right? So for the business owner, it's always a journey. Things are going to change. People are going to quit. You're going to lose accounts. You're going to pick up accounts. You're going to go through all these parts where you're profitable and all of a sudden your expenses are high. And so now you're having to tweak that and figure that out and go back. And how come we didn't make as much money? And how come we're not growing as fast as we were last year? And how come our repairs are down versus, or it's this constant journey of the path. And you have to be able to enjoy it and understand that every day is going to bring something different. There's sometimes where your business might be on autopilot for 6 months. And then all of a sudden you hit that bumpy road and you have to regroup and redo and refocus. But That's the challenge, and that's the fun of running a business, is that it's not the same every day. You don't get to just go every day and go from A to Z and you reach your destination and it's over. Just be aware of that. Enjoy that journey of learning, right? And through the struggle and through the failures is really where you're going to learn to put things in place for your business. And that's the fun part of it. Zach, one more thing, which we didn't talk about, and that is that we are going to be doing a second business matrix.
Yes.
We haven't talked about that. We should have talked about that at the beginning. I don't know. We're pretty bad at that.
Well, use it as my final thoughts.
Okay, so go for it. Final thoughts, Zach.
We're starting another group.
That's it. We're just starting another group.
No, I'm super excited about it after our last meeting with the Matrix group. And like you said, the chat's going ham. It's so cool to see everyone like really just opening up and talking about these things and bouncing ideas off each other. You could tell that the mind is really actively on the business development side of things. And I'm excited that we're able to open up this opportunity to more people that are interested in this, because I think it's a really good thing. This is a scary thing. Like you were just talking about the business journey. It is a journey, and it's a scary thing if you're doing it on your own. And I think that's one thing that I have always had a partner, and in a lot of cases, partnerships can be more stressful than good. But in my case, it's been very good because I've never had to go through it alone. And so with the Matrix group, this is your group. These are your people. Great way to network, great way to learn. So I'm excited for that. And we'll have information on it at the Western, correct?
Yeah. So we'll talk about it. So we finished the first group and we closed it off, and we had a couple other people that wanted to do the Matrix, but we wanted to keep it to a certain amount. Don't want to just have a group, huge group. So we finished that. We did the first Matrix, which was with regards to setting goals. And it was so awesome to just see everybody so pumped up and so working on it. And so the next one, we'll get into the financial KPIs, right? Defining 2 to 4 of your financial KPIs that you're going to start to track. You'll get a chart of accounts, start to learn for the next phase. And by the way, Zach, I still haven't showed you and I haven't showed John, but we grabbed our module that we had for the expenses and we completely blew it up and came up with a new design and adding some new really cool features to it where you can just take a picture and upload the receipt and do all that, all those things. But it's built only for the pool industry. It's not meant for everybody to use, but going to be really user friendly. It's going to show it. It's going to be very data driven, which is the big focus of it. So really excited about that. So in June, what we will do is once all the pool pros from the Matrix are bringing all that information, we'll take a financial class. They'll be able to plug their numbers in and have access to all that data. They'll know their cost of service. They'll know their average profit per pool. They'll know all these financial business metrics, but they'll know exactly where they are. Then from there, we are getting into the employee life cycle, but with the person that we have, the new person that we have now helping us build the education for the Matrix, which is just absolutely amazing. And we have a plan of about 50 different courses that we want to put out just on leadership, on business, on that side of it. They came to us and they said, you know what I think we need to do before we get into the employee life cycle? We need to build a SWOT analysis class, strengths and weaknesses and opportunities for the pool pros. And I'm like, I love it 100%. Because think about it. You have your goals, you have your financial KPIs, you know exactly where your numbers are, and then you're hit, and then you figure out what your strength and weakness and opportunities are for your business. Think about going into 2026, how they're going to be able to just take their businesses to the next level. So really excited about that. So we're going to start one. We will have it at the Western Pool and Spa Show. If there's anybody that's interested, just send me a message. We have 7 people that are already for the second group that we couldn't get into the first group. So we'll bring them into that second group. And once we get to about that 25, we'll roll with that. But what we would do is we would start either end of March or the beginning of April. And then what we would do is they would start their cycle of the business matrix.
And it's all, like Edgar said, this is all planned. And as we've gone through the first 2 stages, some of the recurring things are planning, finance, starting to get into employees, and definitely stage 3 and 4 employees is going to be a common thing. And these are the things that we're focusing on in the matrix to help equip everyone with these things. So super excited. And
we're going to have a get together with the people that are going to the matrix at the Western.
Yes.
We're going to go out to dinner with them, hang out, kind of network. They're going to be coming out to Dallas in March because we're going to be able to go to gold medal pools and visit their facility. And I think they service, I don't know how many thousands, 3, 4, 5,000 pools, whatever it is. That thing is massive over there.
Beautiful.
It's just awesome out there. So anyways, other opportunities that'll come up like that. And then at the PSB Expo, you guys will have education that is specific just for the Matrix members. So those members that are not part of the business matrix can't take those business classes. And like I said, we are working on that roadmap, which by the way, I'll have next week, Zach. I'll have the roadmap of where we're going. And again, it takes you putting a plan and creating your roadmap and doing all those things. So next, not this Tuesday, not today, but next Tuesday, we'll have that roadmap and we'll start heading in that direction. So anyways, everybody, hope that you guys had a great time listening to the podcast. Catch us next week. Next week, we will go into phase number 3. What's phase number 3, Zach?
Phase number 3 is the leadership and scaling phase.
Scaling, baby. It starts to change the entire part of your business. So anyways, hope that you guys have a great one. Have a great week. We'll catch you guys on the next one. Bye, guys.
See ya.